Keizer. It is June 23rd and the time is 12:01. And welcome to everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us today. Let me find the email. Mike, do I read that motion right now when I ask for any other items of adjustment on the agenda?
Well, we don't usually do that we usually don't have an agenda review, so you could just introduce the motion, and then explain it if you'd like to do it, but.
All right, let me.
First order of business.
Mike.
Is it a change or an addition?
Yeah, this is to take off item E from the agenda.
Okay. Need a motion?
Yeah, we do. And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding the language. I meant to have it pulled up, but I was just in so many meetings leading up to this. It is removal of item E from our agenda, which is local member match to the planning funds in the adopted 2026-27 Unified Planning Work Program. And we would like to remove that from the agenda. And I believe there was additional language, Mike,
Yeah, you have to make it as a motion. If you can't find that email, I'll look up for you.
Yeah,
I can just do it either way.
Or someone else can do it.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I move that we remove item E, the local member match to PL funds in the adopted 2026-27 UPWP from the agenda.
Actually, I think the language should be to table it.
Oh,
Is the Robert's rules.
so remove it and then, well, are we tabling it or are we removing it?
Tabling it to a later, tabling means moving it to a later meeting.
Okay.
Postpone.
Remove and table to a later meeting. How's that?
Okay.
You're right.
Second.
Okay.
Well, Kathy,
Sure.
the mic favor.
Let's see, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah.
On the motion?
Can you tell me the purpose of why we're removing it?
Yeah.
We put that item on the agenda, and after it went on the agenda, I learned that Commissioner Morhorst said he couldn't make the meeting. So I contacted him. I said, I noticed you said you couldn't make the meeting, but this was already placed on the agenda. You want to have someone make a motion to remove it from the agenda because he wants to talk on this item. It's about Polk County's paying the share. So I asked if he can get an alternate. He couldn't get an alternate to come to the meeting. So I asked if he wants us to have a motion to remove it, and talked to Vice Chair Carney about that too.
Okay.
So, but I said it has to be a motion approved at the meeting.
So just a point of clarification, because in there it says that invoices for cash and part of the match will be sent out to members in July. So that will not occur then, I assume, because we.
I'm open to delaying if people want to. Normally I send them out in July. And when we talked about it initially in March, I was going to send out those invoices for the match. And then Mr. Morhorst says, well, you can send out the full amount to Polk County and we'll pay what we think we want to pay.
Okay, all right, good. So that you're still going to send out those invoices. All right, thank you. That's the clarification that I needed. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So, thank you. So for the record, Kathy Clark, representing Keizer today. So are the invoices going to be for the original or for us picking up the slack for Polk County?
For the
Because that does not come to, okay, for
yeah,
the
the
original,
original,
thank
the
you.
lower one, which is like 5,600 and something.
That hasn't come to city council, and I saw for the minutes that was gonna come to city council. We've had no conversation on this.
Yeah.
And Mike, how do we go about ensuring that we have all of the pieces in place to restore this on a future agenda, like a conversation with the Kaiser City Council, etc.?
Well, I wasn't planning to attend any local councils, but I would just have it brought back to this board, you know, with an update of what Polk County wants to do. I'm gonna send out the same invoice amounts that I do to them, to all of you. And if Polk County decides to pay the full amount, great. If they decide to pay 2,500, which kind of talked about a little bit the last meeting, you know, well, that's what they'll send in, and we'll let people know that's what they sent in. If we want to discuss that issue of how much they did send in, we can definitely discuss that. Remember, I'm also working on an in-kind process to do in-kind match. And I actually had a presentation to go for this item, but with Mort Horst asking, can we delay it because he wants to be part of the discussion? We can have that discussion in July if we want.
Okay.
It's up to the
Okay.
committee.
So just a clarification, the motion is to,
Table.
do we want to just move this to a date certain of July 25th?
We can do that.
July
Yeah.
28th, I guess.
Yeah. According to Robert's rules, we can delay it to a specific date, or we just table it to a future date.
Okay.
So it's up to the motions, you know, that are put on the table.
Yeah, so if we wanted to delay to a date certain, would we need to rescind the motion that is currently being considered and have a new motion proposed?
I think that'd be the best way to go. So if you want to, exclude, remove your motion from the. Well, it might be easier. Start again.
If the mover removes it from, says, remove their, motion is done, and then you move clean.
I think that's the cleanest thing to do.
Okay. I'll just remove it then.
All right, thank you. So we need a new motion to table it to the July 25th meeting.
All right, I'll make a motion that we postpone item E on the agenda about the Salem-Keizer area transportation study members match to the planning funds until our July meeting.
I'll second the motion.
All right, any discussion on this motion?
Right. What happens if, I mean, is there some urgency to doing it at the next meeting for sure?
I just like to take care of it.
Okay.
I'm still gonna send the invoices out in July, so you'll get invoices, and that this may change that a little bit, but likely. So,
Right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? All right, and I guess, do we have any abstentions? I'm not sure if that was a complete vote. All right,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I blanked out. Was it any no's?
Mel or Director Fuller?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. I came in at just the last moment, the last sentence before the vote. I'm happy to join in. I just don't know what the motion was.
We are voting on a motion to postpone agenda item E, which is local member match to the planning funds in the adopted 2026-27 Unified Planning Work Program to our July meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'll abstain.
All right, so we have one abstention and a vote otherwise. Motion passes. Okay. And so now we need an approval of our policy committee minutes for our meeting that took place on May 26th, 2026.
So I will move approval, and then I want to make a recommendation for a change. So I'm gonna move for approval, so we can have discussion.
Oh, approval of the minutes, I'll second.
To my point on page 10, at the bottom of the page, the statement is, Council Kyle Duran stated that the city of Keizer has no objection to proceeding and have the match amount budgeted. Point of clarification, that's for, our current share. Is that correct? The PL.
I believe that's what he meant,
Since this hasn't come back to council for any change.
yeah.
So I would just ask that clarification be added.
I'm trying to find it again in the minutes.
Bottom of page 10, very bottom.
Okay.
We have not had
I
this
think what he meant
conversation
was,
with it.
what he meant was he had the match amount that Kaiser's share of them was
The original,
budgeted by the city of Kaiser.
that's correct.
Okay.
But, given the context, I want to make it clear that it's not a new amount. This is the amount that had already been, planned for. So, as the next sentence says, Director Carney from Transit was also, so it means that they are the same, prepared to pay his share. So the context, I would like the clarification that Kaiser is prepared to pay our share as originally calculated. Because I believe that's the context of Councilor Duran's comment, unless I misread it. Okay,
Keep bringing my.
I thought I heard in the recording, but
If you give me a second, I'll give you the numbers. So it's a little clearer. We're all clear what the numbers were.
okay.
Which one? Go through the secretary.
You mean to be included in the minutes, Mike? Or just
Second, okay. Okay, okay, so, no. Second slide, go to the second slide. That is this, that one, stay there. Okay, so, the amount that was divided by 7 jurisdictions was 5,636. I think that's the one he was referring to.
Okay.
Right, that you
That's-
budgeted, and I think the same for transit. That's the lower one.
Right.
Okay.
So I would ask that we amend the minutes to state that Councilor Caltrans did the city had no objection to proceeding and had the match amount parens $5,636 and parens budgeted. I'm looking for consensus to add that to the minutes. Chair.
Yes, do we need a motion to have the minutes approved with amendments?
Yes, I think we do.
That's correct.
Okay. Would you like to make that motion?
I did.
You did?
Yeah. I made the motion to approve. It was seconded. I've asked for this amendment and looking for either consensus or I can make it an official motion.
Could you repeat it, please?
To add the word at the bottom of the page where it says match amount, I'm asking for parentheses of $5,636 and parentheses budgeted. So that's the original number. So it's clear that it's the original, not the change that has been under discussion.
Thank you.
We should probably have that modification by Mayor Clark seconded as a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. And then there's a discussion on that.
Yeah, any discussion on the motion in front of us? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the policy committee minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
I
opposed?
You opposed?
No, I said aye.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
no
seven.
opposition.
Cameron's opposed.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Cameron is a no.
Okay.
Maybe we should get a roll call so we get each person's vote.
I think I'm the only no.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah. It's hard in a Zoom call to know what people said, so, or not said.
ODOT voted yes.
Okay. And any abstentions?
Mickey Varney, City of Salem, since I was not here.
So we have one opposed and one abstention. I believe the motion passes, but I'm sorry I'm not clear on everybody that's in the room, but that should pass. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. And thank you for the amendments. I think that's a helpful clarification. And that brings us to item C on our agenda, which is public comment. I didn't see anything in our mail from staff, but if we have anyone in the room who would like to deliver public comments or anyone online, now is the time we have set aside to hear from you. Okay. I believe that brings us to item D on our agenda, which is the Oregon Transportation Safety Action Plan. And that is Mary McGowan and Walt McAllister from ODOT.
Perfect. Hope you can hear me okay.
We can, yeah. Thank you for
Wonderful.
joining us.
Thank you for having us. I'll do a quick introduction and I'll hand it over to Walt to introduce himself before we jump in. My name is Mary McGowan. I'm a statewide transportation planner with the Oregon Department of Transportation and project manager to the update of the 2026 Transportation Safety Action Plan. And Walt, you want to introduce yourself?
And I'm Walt McAllister. I work with the Transportation Safety Office, longtime safety project person.
Perfect. All right, so just a few things we want to touch on today. I know we're going to try to be pretty focused in this presentation because you guys have lots to cover during the short meeting. Highlighting key objectives or key elements of the updated plan, reviewing what we learned from safety partners as well as our crash data analysis that we conducted, and then discussing approval process and overall opportunities for input as we are nearing the tail end of this planning process. Just to remind you all what the TSAP is, we update it every 5 years, so you may be familiar with it a little bit, and I know you guys have done safety planning within SKATS as well. So that's a really good example of kind of the local, more regional level of safety planning, and then we have the statewide plan, which is the TSAP, the Transportation Safety Action Plan. So this outlines how we improve roadway safety for all users on all roads, all agencies and jurisdictions. So this is a statewide plan, not just an ODOT plan. And then the plan's ultimate goal is to create a system where everyone can travel safely, thinking about all the ways people get through the system, driving, walking, rolling, biking, or taking public transportation. The TSAP is a deep dive on safety issues. The intent of this is to refine some of the broad policy direction that's established by our Oregon Transportation Plan. We have 9 statewide modal and topic plans. The Oregon Transportation Plan is our statewide transportation system plan, and then we have various modal and topic plans beneath that. The TSAP is one of them specifically for safety on this one. It is a data-driven plan focused on critical safety issues. That's why I mentioned the crash data analysis. And then it also identifies short-term actions, all working towards a Vision Zero goal of 2050. But it has those short-term actions that we'll be focused on in the next 5 years. And these include things such as infrastructure, operations, maintenance, design, but also behavioral programs and also other safety programs that are provided by our statewide partners. The TSAP is federally required by Federal Highway Administration in order to receive safety funding for our All Roads Transportation Safety Program, as an example. So it's very important that we get this plan approved by October of 2026 of this year. Just to touch on a few key elements of what's included in this plan and how this is different from previous planning processes. Again, it comes at the tail end of the most recently adopted Oregon Transportation Plan. And And so it includes certain elements and policy direction that are established by the OTP. The first one being approaching safety holistically. So this is a different look in how we've done with previous TSAPs, although this isn't a new approach by any means, but it's the safe systems approach. This is critical policy direction that was established by the OTP, and this means we look at safety by providing, looking at safer roads, safer people, safer streets, safer people, safer speed, safer vehicles, post-crash care in terms of how we respond to incidents. And Oregon is being unique in that we're also adding in a land use element and looking at how we support land use that reinforces safe travel and safe travel options. This approach of the safe systems approach recognizes that humans ultimately do make mistakes when we're using the system, but hopefully when they do, that the outcomes of the crash will be less severe. So less fatals and less serious injuries on the system. The TSAP has both visionary and practical target setting elements. And I know the MPOs need to set safety targets as well. Well, the TSAP includes two kind of aspirational targets. We have a Vision Zero by the year of 2050 for fatal and serious injuries, but looking also a 30% reduction by the year of 2035. So we have kind of that intermediate target. The main justification for doing a Vision Zero process is that ultimately everyone deserves to live in a safe community, no matter where they live, how they travel. So zero continues to be what we work towards as a state. The TSAP is a very data-driven plan. It helps us, by using data, it helps us to really prioritize those critical areas to focus our safety efforts. We're calling these emphasis areas in our TSAP, all with the intention of making the system safer for all. So we may be focusing our efforts into key emphasis areas, but it's going to have a much broader effect and broader impact. And through this approach, we're addressing some of the core causes and core behaviors. You'll see Walt kind of get into, when he goes over his few slides, we get into kind of a tiering structure within the TSAP that'll help us kind of focus some of our investments. And approaching safety in this manner will have a direct benefit for safety issues, including those most vulnerable in the system. So we're always thinking about people walking and people biking on the system as we're making improvements. The plan also includes a list of strategic actions. You did receive a draft copy in your packet materials today. And so these will be actions that state and local partners work to implement over the next 5 years. This isn't an exhaustive list of everything we do for safety, but again, it's a focused set of actions to help try to make the greatest impact. And let's go ahead and switch over to Walt. We'll touch on
Great,
some of the
thanks.
key takeaways. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Mary. So the key message here is we didn't create this plan in a vacuum. It builds on prior plan. It uses the latest research and science in terms of how plans are developed to maximize safety improvement. And we looked at the data and our public comments to build a robust plan. So first, let's take a look at this data slide, which is of concern. We were concerned when we first saw the information presented this way. We thought, well, let's take a look at how 2 5-year periods back to back, how we compare currently compared to where we were at with the last 5-year plan. And what we learned was that there's been a dramatic jump in serious crashes, serious injury crashes, a less dramatic jump in fatal crashes. The significant spike that you see, and I'm here to share with you, is the total number of crashes that represent the background on that have gone down a little bit. The fatal numbers have held relatively steady, as you can see by the graph, but the serious injury crashes have taken a dramatic jump. And we thought, well, maybe this is a reporting error. There's something going on there, which I'm sure when you look at it, you're left with a bunch of questions as well. Well, what we learned is that this is not an anomaly. We compared it to other states. We compared to our health authority data and came to the conclusion that yes, in fact, we're seeing more serious injury crashes. And that leads us to the next thing. Was there a decrease in fatal crashes? Well, it's about 3% between 22 and 23. And it looks like 24, it's going to continue to descend. And yet you still see that jump. So we took another way to look at it, and we said, well, how about what's happened between the two periods? Well, there's a 44% increase, almost all of it the serious injury crashes between the two 5-year periods. So, what else could be going on? Well, we put our research team on it, and what we came to is that there's an increase in, and you'll see in the next slide, there's an increase in pedestrian activity. There's an increase in the number of the age and the number of older drivers in Oregon that are driving, and they are more vulnerable when they're in their cars. And so there's some indication that might be part of it. There's been some question marks about vehicle size and weight, although we don't have the rock solid data that we'd like to have on that yet. So we'll continue to work on that as we develop as we work our plan in the future. And then finally, health issues could be driven behind it, not just age, but as if people are in declining health, they're much more likely to be seriously injured. So let's go ahead and hit the next slide, which helps reveal a little bit more about what's going on. And one of the things we shared with our partners and has informed our decision making. You'll note that in these boxes, they're not 100%. These events are not mutually exclusive. You can have a drunk leave the road. You can have that drunk be young, and you can have that drunk also be on a motorcycle. So you can't get to 100% by looking at these numbers, and that's important to keep in mind as you try to digest what's going on here. You can also see down below there's the total number of fatal and serious injury crashes, so you get a sense of what the volume of proportion means. Roadway departure, vast, far and away. People leaving the road is 39% of events. Intersection crashes at 48, and you've driven a significant number of the events just with those two. There are other ways to get in crashes, but the bulk of the events happen in those two types of locations. We saw some shifting in the reports on crashes, pedestrian events increase. That'll pop up on the next slide. Speed-related crashes are present in 25% of all fatal and serious injury crashes, as you can see there. And there is a lack of enforcement in Oregon. So how we address that is significant in that we have a limited toolbox. We have some modern technology that can be applied, provided that the citizens accept it and are comfortable with that change in the way we enforce the laws. The other thing we can do is we can look at speed zoning policies and try to tamp down speed by using good policy. So 24% with the aging drivers, it's important to emphasize here that is just purely an age representation, does not represent the health declines groups that pop up in our data, but we do have programs for that. What we're looking at here is these are people that were at the wheel and were injured. There's not a fault determinant with that aging driver number. We did hear a couple of other things. A novice driver can be a person of any age, and a lot of Oregonians are in their first 2 years of having a license. And so we continue to need to focus on driver training and new drivers in general to help them successfully get past that first 2 years when they're most at risk for a crash event. And those at-risk health conditions that I mentioned earlier, that can be any age. You can be in your 20s and have challenges with health that make it difficult for you to drive successfully. There was questions about reporting and alcohol, and you'll note that we mentioned other drugs. There's a significant presence of polydrug use in our crash events now, and that's causing consternation among our law enforcement and also in terms of best path forward for addressing these issues. The alarming numbers are the 14% young drivers and 14% crashes involving a motorcyclist, and motorcyclists do not represent 14% of the driving public. So both of these, the last two groups of 14% you see are groups that are they're overrepresented in the crash picture, so they demand more attention be paid to them because of that overrepresentation. Let's hit the next slide. And this is yet another way to look at this information. And this is the dramatic increases in the two between the two 5-year periods. And you'll notice that massive increase in percentages. And we see distracted driving going from being a moderately significant cause of crashes to now moving up into the significant causes of crashes category. Unrestrained drivers continue to be a challenge. We note that we had tamped things down to 900 and now they're up 68% in current crash history. And you can go down the list and you can see how things are happening. You'll also note, I think it's important to point out that pedestrian number, we jumped from 3,400, which was significant already, or intersections, sorry, to 52, and a significant share of those in our urban areas involve pedestrians. So we've got some challenges there, and how people are choosing to behave on the system has changed in the last, in this, 5-year period over a 5-year period look. We've seen increases in across the board. You can see how those changes have come about, and we believe these numbers are important because they flag the trends of what's on the move. So let's hit the next slide, and I'd like to share with you what we did. We listened to our community and we looked at the data, and this is how we chose to tackle things. The community said, you need to focus more. There's not enough money to go around. You don't have enough law enforcement. You don't have enough resources to build new facilities. So let's break it down into top tier areas where we need to pursue things, and then a second tier, which they're all important, but the idea is that we could make some wins. For example, if we win on roadway safety, we'll win on pedestrian and bicyclist. We will make a dent in the aging driver because we'll have less T-bone crashes if we can move to roundabouts, for example, to have offset crashes instead of T-bone crashes, which are traumatic for them. The top tier is, as you saw in the earlier slides, reflects the crash picture. It reflects where the events are, and you'll also notice how it breaks out. It's a couple of things about where crashes are located, and then the top two behaviors that involve crashes. And then in the second tier, we tend to break it down by person instead of behavior, with unrestrained occupant kind of being on the edge and distracted driving. Those two are more behavior oriented because all ages are involved in those problems.
Question.
Yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
question in the room. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for touching on the distracted drivers. Please tell me how that could be second tier when it is by far and away the biggest jump in risk in the previous slide.
So it's a big risk, but if you look at the numbers, it's still at 1,600. So if you go back one more slide, Mary. Roadway departure represents the big volume at 5299, intersection at 5201. We believe if we work roadway departure, we're going to pick up speed, we're going to pick up distracted driving, and driver inattention generally, and we probably will be picking up some progress on alcohol and other drugs. And there's different ways to address roadway departure. One of them is rumble strips. It's a popular tool that we have in Oregon because it is so effective. It guides, it basically alerts people that they are no longer in their lane and need to correct. And we also have noted too that our fleet age is getting older. We're at, I believe 12 was the last number I saw. And at one time we were at 8. An older fleet doesn't have the advanced driver assistance system. So if we can get people into newer cars, particularly people that are more likely to take risks, that'll make a significant difference. I don't know if that, hopefully that got kind of answered that question of why it slipped into the second tier. Go ahead and go to the next slide too, Mary, just to take a look at that number again. On distracted driving, 806, and it did jump to 1,700. So it's about half of the top tier events. So and in speed is it's again, it's not half, but it's a little over half of the speed related crashes. And a little over half of the alcohol and other drug-related crashes. So, we have to look both at the volume and the percent increase, and that was part of the decision-making process. Plus, it was public input. Okay, so let's roll on to the next slide. I think we've pretty much run through this. Mary, if you want to go over the next steps on what we've got planned, and then we can move into discussion.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Walt. So here's an overview of our project schedule. I mentioned we're kind of at the tail end since we're in public review now. We launched the public review June 15th. It's open until the end of July 31st. We're doing a series of engagements as part of this. We have a webinar that's scheduled for this week. So if there are other folks within the SKATS area that would be interested or want to participate, I can share with you the access and registration info for the webinar that's happening this week. Probably be a very similar presentation to this as well. But we're also hosting a public hearing. This will be with the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee. This is a typical regular public meeting as well. But this will be a very formal process where we allow folks to come speak and provide testimony on the plan. So it's a little bit more thorough, more formal than just a comment, I guess you could say. But that'll be happening in July 8th. Then at the end of the summer, we'll be working on refining the draft to incorporate the feedback we've received over the public comment period. And then we'll be going back to the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee in September. We're hoping that we will be requesting that they recommend the plan for adoption by the Oregon Transportation Commission. So then we'll ultimately go back to them in October of 26 for their adoption. And then we submit the plan to FHWA for their acknowledgement as well after that. Let's go to the next couple slides. So I hope we have a few minutes for any additional questions that have come up. Any feedback or questions on the draft plan itself. Now would be the time to bring those up.
And we'll count on the chair to cut us off when the time comes.
Please.
Well, we removed an agenda item, so you may be in luck. You may get to hear it
There
all.
we go.
Great, thank you.
I know I have a few questions, but I'll open it to other folks on the committee to see if there are other questions that we want to ask our ODOT presenters.
Yeah. Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
Mr. Cameron, specific data on intersections over a period of time where I think of Salem here, they've got speed cameras and red light cameras in some of the higher crash intersections, Commercial and Madrona, and what's the other? Oh, we got going over the bridge. There's like 3 or 4 main ones. Is there data that has shown the reductions in safety, and is that incorporated in this as you set priorities into that detail?
So are you asking about data as far as effectiveness of photo enforcement?
Yeah, photo enforcement, even, for example, and Mayor Clark, you could tell me what used to be there before the roundabout, when you replace an intersection with a roundabout, those types of things as far as safety changes. Because these are all these numbers that we're seeing are increased reasons for serious accidents or deaths.
Yeah.
Is there some work that's been done that shows, we've decreased it in these particular places because of these safety things that we've done?
So when we prepared our plan, we relied on research and didn't point to specific locations within Oregon. But there is an emphasis area that one of the work actions that the pages speaks to how enforcement can change the way it speaks to the effectiveness of the tool or tools and how to go about tackling the challenges at these locations, but we didn't cite specific Oregon locations.
So engineering is one, obviously enforcement's another one, education, all, 3, whatever the fourth one is, but I was more focused on probably the engineering because I think of a traffic.
Yeah. And so there's a number of things that can be done from an engineering standpoint, with dramatic changes being the most expensive and and the longest term to get built, but you can do things with oversized signage to reduce events. You can do something with signal timing, so that it's called a leading pedestrian crossing, where the pedestrian gets a chance to get partway across the intersection and get visible to the driver as they're making their right turn before the light turns green for the driver, and that helps reduce those conflicts. And those have been tested out in Oregon, but we don't speak to that in the plan.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Walt,
that's kind of what I was after was
Yeah.
what's the data, like when we're making decisions in our county or
Mhm.
and you just talked about sidewalk. I know in Salem they do that, right? The green walk sign goes on, but what's the data? Where can we get the data that shows if you do this, then this?
Yeah, there is a and Mary, do you remember the name of the publication that we have for pedestrian? It's particularly focused on pedestrian safety.
well,
And
I was thinking of something that our research office was doing. I don't think it was that one.
yeah,
Well,
and
research office was doing.
we gave to our contractor for incorporation into the write-up. There's a new set of standards to make, for example, roundabouts safer, that came out from it's a National Association of Cities that brought research on how to make roundabouts safer for those kinds of crossings, which is part of the intersection mix. There's a research paper on the leading indicators. There's not a guidebook, though, if that's what you're craving. It kind of is, you have to synthesize what's available. That would be a great project for OSU or PSU to do, is to develop a guidebook, and I'll bring that up with our roadway person.
And Walt, I was thinking I had a conversation with our research folks at ODOT too, and this has been on their radar, and I can't recall the name of the research. I will try to track it down for you though, but it looks at kind of the more quantitative benefits of automated enforcement, because we've had that question come up. So I'll look and see if I can dig that up with our research folks.
Yeah.
I mean, Oregon in general just underfunds law enforcement. And so, when you don't have that presence there, right, people are more prone to take risky behaviors. So having that automated enforcement supports, provides more tools in our tool basket, so to speak, to support some of the lack of actual patrols.
And we do have, one of the data points that is interesting to note is Oregon's got a pretty steady churn of population. Roughly 20% of the population departs and new people arrive, and the new people aren't familiar with the driving environment here. And that is definitely affects, I believe that may be an explanation for part of what's going on at the intersections, but I don't have any, well, let's just say I don't have any research proof of that yet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cameron, when we did the SKATS safety plan, we had our strategies and we talked about various ones. We had some quantitative data. The one particular to red light cameras, as I recall, I couldn't find a definitive source from like a national group. It was probably recommended as a good strategy, but it didn't have a strategy that says it will reduce by X number percent. The ones I did find were like things in Florida, and they were a mixed bag, of saying what the percentage would be. So I think there's still more data collection to see how these red light cameras actually change the amount of crashes or fatal and serious. I'm sure things have changed in even the 2 years you've been doing it.
Yeah, and I would note in the chat, Jigwan has placed a research paper from the US DOT, so you can take a look at that. Thank you, Jigwan.
Can I just?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add to answer Commissioner Cameron. The Salem Police Department is tracking those and reports annually on the impacts of the green light or the green lights and the red lights and the other ones. And so they're tracking it, and they have the graphs things. So they're a good source of information. And that combined, because we are producing more and more data than we have, and it just keeps increasing. And now it's also tied into our EMS system in terms of how they're reporting it. So you can see what the impact is.
Yeah. And as a final offering on this topic, before we move on, the Oregon legislature required that our office submit a paper about the effectiveness of these devices, and that paper documents the results of Oregon's placement of photo radar and photo red light capabilities, and what the results were. And those reports are available through the legislature.
Thank you. Questions from others?
Sorry.
I have a few. Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. Either way, Mickey Barney again. I had a data question back from slides 5 and 6. As we look at the increases by year, how does that relate to the increase in drivers on the road, or how is that measured as a proportion rather than just numbers of incidents?
So my understanding of Oregon's population growth is that it has not been that exponential. There is a relationship because Oregon's population is growing, but it hasn't spiked that much in the last 3 years. However, the population has changed in that last 3 years. The people that we have in Oregon has changed.
I would ask the question, how can we, or perhaps how should we consider this report when it is final in our work? I noticed that there was some recommendations within the report about, I think it was like, requiring safety be prioritized in project selection. And that's us, right?
So,
We're
so
the project selectors.
my hope, and the hope that the plan holds forth is just like when SKATS developed your plan for your local area for project work, that you would use that as your cue to make your local work and your support of ODOT work prioritize safety as the top priority, and then move down the list of issues that you want to prioritize, but that safety starts moving, if it's not already at the top of your list, that it moves up, and that you use your own plan to drive that home and in your work with your constituents and with your policymakers.
I guess one example I was thinking of, within ODOT, we're developing this capital investment program. So that was kind of the lens that we were thinking of it when we were developing the ODOT side, but thinking about it also when you develop your MTIPs or the local investment selection, incorporating safety. And you very well probably do that to some extent as well, but it's taking another look to really try to elevate and emphasize the role that it plays in project selection.
And we added the new element. A lot of us over the years have talked about land use planning and how we develop our communities. This plan brings up explicitly that safety is affected by how communities develop. And if development is done with an eye to separating modes and providing ways to travel without minimizing conflicts. You can't completely get away from conflicts, but neighborhoods that are designed to minimize conflicts and provide pedestrian venues and bicyclist and other vehicle venues, that can make a significant difference. But that's more of a 20-year look. But it's only going to change if it happens at the local level. So.
Yeah, land use is a slow ship to turn.
It is. Yeah, it's a 20, 30-year look, but it can be done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have a question about the underlying data, in particular the crash data. When I was looking at information available on ODOT's website, there's some concerning sort of disclaimers. A crash coded as possible injury may involve a life-threatening internal injury, but the database will classify it as minor. bicycle vehicle crashes that do not require medical transport are systematically underreported. Vulnerable road users are underreported. Micromobility users on e-scooters and e-bikes. ODOT's vulnerable road user safety assessment notes that these groups face elevated risk but inconsistent reporting. So I'm wondering, as we're looking at a data-driven plan, how do we consider gaps in the data when they're kind of known and recognized by ODOT in the overall plan?
So, that's an intrinsic challenge in the way our data is structured. We do have the ability. So every health transport, our health authority tracks every EMS transport, and that gives us an ability to compare, not directly, indirectly, between the two data sets. And that's part of how we know there's a disconnect between what's reported through the motor vehicle crash report system and what's actually happening on the ground, is we have that health look. And we also have geolocate with that, because the vehicles tell us where the pickup was, where the victim was picked up. And we're working, even as we speak, there's a crew in Portland that's working on connecting up the trauma registry, which is okay, they were bad enough to be admitted to the hospital, and then what was the patient outcome and the total cost. So that's it is in the works, and it will give us better results because we'll have costing to these events, and we'll pick up all of the, we won't have the causation data on the pedestrian and bicycle. We'll definitely know what happened and the cost. So that's coming. But big systems like this cost substantial amounts of money to improve and take an inordinate amount of time. I inherited traffic records about a decade ago, and I have some things that I started working on day one, like the citizen crash report, the ability to complete it online. I started on that the day I arrived on the job, and it took a decade just to get that form online. And that's just one example of a project that, it sounds simple enough on the surface, but definitely wasn't simple.
Well, can I ask a question too related to that, and
Sure.
maybe it builds off the initial question. We're transitioning more to electronic data reporting. Will that help us to kind of flesh out some of those?
It's good. So as we transition to electronic reporting, it gives you faster data. Those cities that already have electronic data reporting, or state police, they can look at their citation information, which we don't have at the statewide level right now. They can get that information locally. They can, if your local agency participates in the NEMSIS, which we're at 99%, so odds are they do. You can look at that data locally and see where the ambulance events are occurring, which stretches of road. You can start identifying your most expensive corridors from a serious injury. And honestly, when a person is dropped by the ambulance crew at the hospital and they believe they've got a serious injury, I have a lot more faith in that than the box being checked because they got in the ambulance. So we can get more. It's just the time, and the electronics will help that, because we'll basically be able, it kind of the holy grail that I've been chasing, if you will, thinking Indiana Jones like, is I want to get the crash report tied up with the ambulance ride and tied up with the hospital visit, because when you get that connection across across an event, then you can start saying, oh, okay, this crash was costly or this crash was not, and then build that for a stretch of road. So that's kind of, and it can be done at the local level. SKATS could work with your local fire, EMS, and law enforcement, and get that data more linked up locally at first, and then as the state catches up, then we'll try to stitch it all together at the state level. I saw Michael raise his hand, though. I didn't want to miss him.
Yeah, thank you. This is a sensitive question, and I just want to make it clear it's strictly about math. I look at your chart here, and this pretty radical increase in serious injuries in this specific timeline. 20 to 20 to 23,
Yeah.
that overlaps perfectly with a radical influx of illegal aliens in America, many of whom have been granted driver's license and can't read English. Do you keep any data on the demographics of the people, other than the ones you've shown here, of people involved in those kind of wrecks?
So,
And this is about math. I want to make it clear. This is about math. I'm only talking about the
I would say
math.
that's probably not an issue. That'd be my guess. And the reason why I say that is, we would have been able to pick when we were looking for what was the causes on the spike. It would have been able to be picked up that these are folks that are holding non-citizen licenses, and that wasn't identified as an issue.
Yeah. All right.
So it's I don't believe there's a relationship there.
Ms. Mayor Clark. Thank you. First of all, I want to register a strong offense to the question. This wasn't math. We are seeing math when it comes to changes in behavior such as distracted driving and drug and alcohol use and so forth, which are very clear and present issues in our transportation usage and abuse. And I really want to focus on those behaviors and disassociate it from any sort of socioeconomic or immigration status. So I want to register that comment. Secondly, to some of the comments earlier, I'd like to state for the record that safety has been a top priority of SKATS for at least the last 20 years that I've been associated with this work. So check that box. As far as I'm concerned, as far as the city of Keizer has been concerned from my entire career as a elected official. What I'm looking for in this work, and I would encourage that it be included in presentations, are changes that have happened in driver behavior. Distracted has risen clearly, and although the numbers are not significantly more than some of the others, the rise is significant and deserves a great deal of attention. So also what we'd be looking for is, what other engineering and design elements do we need to add to our portfolio? We're already doing where we can rumble strips, the hole in space, the strategic narrowing and so forth. What other tools are available to cities as we're doing design to create spaces for transportation that are adapting to some of the latest engineering opportunities that we can use, and they are not very expensive. We've done a number of safety projects that are pretty inexpensive. So I want to end with that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I would just agree with Mayor Clark in registering my similar offense to the question. Thank you for noting that. And also with the idea that sort of implementation strategies beyond kind of the general language and ideas would be great, so that we could have some examples to look to and potentially emulate. I know that, the variety of transportation infrastructure out there is huge. But just some general guidelines. Like I noticed at one point in the plan, it was talking about bicycle and pedestrian connections. Right. And I live close to a busy street that has sidewalks. It has bike lanes. Both are 4 feet. And the speed limits are not adhered to, right? So people are driving maybe close to 50 miles an hour next to a 4-foot bike lane and a 4-foot sidewalk. I get nervous when my kids are standing still at a bus stop out there, that somebody's going to drive by too close and, a side view mirror is going to take somebody's head off. is, so like some implementation strategies like a minimum width or a recommended width, or what increases sort of a pedestrian sense of safety in an environment so that people are more likely to walk or ride their bikes, because I think that aligns with some of our other goals as a state.
I want to respond. I don't think asking a question about math is offensive at all. I'm sorry if someone was offended by that, but that's why I prefaced my question as it's strictly about math. And math never lies, and I don't see any problem about asking a question relating to math. If someone is so sensitive they're offended by that, I'm sorry. It was not my intention to offend anyone. It's simply a question about math, and the good gentleman made it very clear that this ODOT does not find that as an issue. I don't agree with that, but that's the way it is. So thank you for listening.
Director Fuller?
Yeah, thanks. I just, if I heard correctly, Member Schaufler and the math, that we would be making decisions on this board based on immigration status or any of the not math that you're talking about. That's just really shocking to me. That statement stunned me. I just wanted to put that on the record. It's and I see that there's an answer in the chat that there is some data on that. So I'm not buying the math comment, but the data's there for you to see.
No, well, I appreciate that. It was strictly about math. It was not about socioeconomic status, but it clearly that math overlaps. It's clear as crystal. It does.
Interesting fact. The DMV investigated, and what we learned is that people that have that have issues with their license status tend to be really, really safe drivers. So that is why perhaps thinking about the data with the 61% increase in unlicensed drivers, well, they're probably going to be really safe drivers because they don't have a license. That's based on the research, and so that I think that maybe is why that comment doesn't ring true, or that question.
Well, I perhaps have a related question, and that is on page 3 of the draft plan that you shared. It says some communities experience higher transportation safety risks due to systemic, geographic, and economic factors.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could just speak briefly to that.
So some of the research is just completely not clear. We do know that people that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum have greater challenges with their driving. And what we don't know is it the car? Is it that their life is really stressful? For example, if you're working 2 full-time jobs to try and make ends meet, you're not allowing a lot of time for sleep and family, and that may reduce your ability to safely operate your motor vehicle. We don't know if that's really what's going on. We also know that people that have, for example, they have to travel at unusual times, and there has been some linkage found about shift work being a problem in a lot of burger joint, taco joint, those fast food places. They don't pay much, and they involve traveling in at night when other impaired drivers are on the road. So there's some things going on, and the research is not definitive. It's been on our radar for at least a decade, and we continue to look for answers in that area, but they're not. It's not like we can say, aha, this is the thing. If everybody made $20 an hour, we would have no more crash problems. I don't think that's what we're going to find, but That hasn't been the results of the research so far. I'll say that that it's directly tied to your pay. I do think that, you know, if you combine all of the things, you think about it. If you don't have a lot of money, you might try to run your tires further. If you don't have a lot of money, you might not be you might be barely insured. If you don't have a lot of money, you might not be getting enough sleep. And all of those are things that, you know, well, the insurance probably not, except for the event is more catastrophic if you're not well covered.
Well, and I think you're likely to live in an area that is not as well served by pedestrian and bicycle
And
infrastructure.
Portland has been struggling with this, and they are one of, if you look at the statistics, Portland contributes significantly to our crash events, particularly pedestrian events in Oregon, and they've got places in Portland that are still in gravel. And is that where the events are occurring? No, it's usually in the transition zone between the gravel and the pavement. You know, they have invested also in research to try and figure out, well, what do we need to do? Do we just need to pave these roads? Do we need better signage? You know, the answers have not been easy there either, and they're reasonably well resourced as a community. It's kind of, you know, it's been on my mind because I work with local communities, including your group over the years. And so I'm always on the lookout for answers. I don't know, does that kind of address what you were headed for?
I think it does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. This stuff's challenging. And, you know, if you want to talk about immigration, there are some states that drive 80 miles an hour. That's their legal speed limit. When they come to Oregon, they think we're nuts because we do 55 or 65. And they want to do 80. And that creates challenges from a safety standpoint. So,
That's the immigrants from Montana. We should be.
Well, I'm not going to point out a state. I know better than that, but I will point out that there are different speed limits in different parts of the USA. And that just that one single thing, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see where that could create maybe a conflict on the road. And that's just one of many, many differences in laws that come with, when you relocate and you come to a new place. Things don't align. And so you've got to figure out the lay of the land again.
Mm-hmm. I maybe have one final question, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the group for anything before we move on to our other agenda items. And that is around speed reduction. We've sort of been educated in this group over past years that the speed of a roadway is determined by existing roadway user behavior. Do we have the latitude to simply say, let's knock that down?
So there's a legal framework, and you have to look. So one of the things that engineers look at probably has come up in this group before is the 85th percentile, how 85% of the population behaves when exposed to a given particular roadway. But then there's the entire business district and residential district legal framework. Residential, typically the framework is 25. Business districts, the speed is typically 20. And you need only look to Silverton to see where 20 has become the law of the land in their downtown core, because they wanted to reduce their pedestrian and bicyclist conflicts. That may be a valid choice. It's going to have severe impacts on throughput, which is also a matter of concern in your broader community. I'm thinking about getting from Keizer to, say, South Commercial could take an awfully long time if you did 20 the whole way. So you might, that's where the challenge comes in is, there's expediency versus safety. And it's not something that it's a decision that has to be made locally. It can't be made. And that's why we have meetings. So.
Madam Chair, we lost,
we need 4 for a quorum. We have, I said, at least 3.
We lost Kathy, and I'm going to have to leave here in about a little over 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, we have 3 online, and Mickey Barney makes 4, so that
still have a quorum.
We still have a quorum. Yeah.
Okay.
And all the
Thank
other
you,
items
Commissioner
are
Cameron.
are not necessarily discussions. But the item F is maybe the one where we'd like to get some direction. Is it true, Steve? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Then let's thank you to our ODOT presenters. That was very helpful. I will pass along the public comment period to those that might be interested. And I hope the rest of you will do the same. And for now, let's move on to agenda item F, which is the Federal Surface Transportation Reauthorization. And that is with Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my presentation, and I'll just say, if we need to come back next meeting for more discussion on this, that's totally fine. And I'll give the presentation outline and see kind of where we get with everyone here. But the purpose of this update is not to be a deep dive, but just to be an update on federal surface transportation reauthorization. And part one of that is the Basics Act, which is the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, our MPO member body, their marker bill, which they put together to outline concepts for a federal reauthorization bill. And then to talk a little bit about the newer Build America 250 Act, which was introduced and marked up by the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and that is still working its way through the House right now. We can discuss a letter of support for the Basics Act, but we can also leave that for July if needed. So just I guess I'll preface this all by saying as well, slides I borrowed from templates from AMPO, which provided some great resources on this. So I've just edited for our purposes some of their materials. But background wise, reauthorization is Congress periodically passes a multi-year bill authorizing surface transportation programs for highways, transit bridges, safety and planning. Happens roughly every 5 years, and you can see the timeline going back to 1998 of recent surface transportation bills. Our most recent one was 2021, the IIJA, or sometimes also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or bill. And this is reauthorization. Why it's important to us is it determines the amount of federal funding that flows to our region, which programs we're able to access, so how we can spend those funds, and then what kind of flexibility you have in terms of programming and project selection. And SKATS typically in the IIJA right now, we roughly have about $8 million a year in annual formula funding that comes through the surface transportation bills. So as probably a lot of you know, Congress is working on their next reauthorization because the IIJA expires on September 30th. And like I mentioned, the Basics Acts, which is AMPO, and the LOT Coalition, which is the Local Officials Transportation Coalition, they have this marker bill. The idea behind it is to get Congress to see what type of concepts they've developed from discussions with their membership, so local governments, whether it's city, counties, regional councils, or MPOs. And the idea is to introduce that into the legislative process and hope that aspects of it are included in whatever is eventually signed into law. And it's a fairly long process, so it's basically the opportunity for AMPO to advocate for its members and for NPOs to have our opportunity to support concepts that are that we would like to have included, or flag things that are potentially aspects that we wouldn't want to have included in a surface transportation reauthorization. So Where we are right now with the IIJA is there was a total of $567 billion in surface transportation funding, split between formula and discretionary programs. The key here on this slide is just when the IIJA was became law, there was a pretty substantial increase in the amount of discretionary grant funding programs. And so it significantly increased the amount and the proportion of funding that was available for typically competitive grant programs. What the discussion and the tenor with Congress has been is that this next bill would likely shift back to being more formula focused, and possibly a consolidation of the total number of discretionary programs. So that's kind of the more typical cycle that or typical setup that has been customary for surface transportation bills. But one of the concerns that was identified was that if there's a decrease in discretionary funds, local governments could lose, and regions could lose access to currently available funding in the IIJA. And so that is what led to the development of the Basics Act. And one of the purposes is just to protect local and regional access to funding. And I'll talk a little bit more on that, not on this slide, but on the next one. This one just highlights the why this is important, and local governments owning about 40, so counties, cities owning about 43% of the federal aid highway system and 75% of overall road miles in the US, and then receiving closer to about 16% of federal funds for transportation. So the Basics Act itself, what is in the markup bill is, these are just some of the higher level points about what's included, but modernizing our planning PL funds, so an increase to our metropolitan planning funds that we use for staff time here at the MPO, a switch from what is currently an 80% match to 100% match share, federal share for that PL program. Although we're on a sliding scale here in Oregon, so we pay a little bit less. Our match share is 10.27 for PL and for other programs as well. And then opening the option for MPOs, if they choose, to be a direct recipient of PL funds rather than working with the state DOTs for access to those funds. And then some expansion of eligibilities and what the program funds could be used for. And I think that relates to some planning and maybe some preliminary design activities. Other key aspects of the Basics Act include an overall increase to surface transportation block grant funding. That's our main and most flexible source of funding that we have at the MPO. And it's also the largest share of funding that we distribute for projects. Increases to the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's actually the program that typically funds the All-Road Transportation Safety Program, the ARTS program, which was mentioned in the previous presentation. And then the inclusion, another important part of this is the inclusion of a 25% sub-allocation specific for local and regional government agencies. So those funds are being shared to local and regional governments. Continues the Bridge Formula Program and include, again, the 25% sub-allocation. And then here on the right side, some pieces like reaffirming MPO project selection criteria, strengthening the consultation process in areas outside of MPO areas, so below 50,000 in population, access for MPOs to the Financial Management Information System, which is FHWA's grant management program that we don't have direct access to right now. And then a couple other pieces about our regional transportation planning organizations, which are usually agencies that are in non-MPO areas as well. So that doesn't have as much to do with us. And then sub-allocations for funds for protected from transfer. So just overall funding changes, the Basics Act would, the purpose that we're hearing from AMPO is that the Basics Act would increase guaranteed funding for local governments and states. So the intent is not to take away funding from states. The intent is to grow available funding and then just ensure that the local and regional governments have access to formula funds that are stable and available for projects. So then just to recap, so at the last Oregon MPO Consortium meeting, OMPOC's board voted to submit a letter of support to the Oregon Congressional Delegation. It's included in the packet as part of agenda item H, because we're going to talk about OMPOC a little bit later. Some other MPOs, I think the Central Lane MPO, Metro, have both submitted letters of support, and then I know the Rogue Valley MPO and the Middle Rogue MPO are both considering or discussing submitting letters of support as well. Basically, what the letters say.
Go ahead.
Okay. Basically, what the
We'll talk about this in July too.
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, we don't have to have a letter yet.
I think it's an ongoing process. So whether it's specific to basics or is more general, I think that could be adapted. So
OMPOC as a group submitted the letter.
Right.
Already. We could do our own letters if we want to. This is partly informational.
So anyway, what's included in the letter that OMPOC sent, and it's basically a focus on affecting the Basics Act that would support delivering projects faster, focus on safety, invest in repairing locally owned bridges, increase federal support for regional planning, while also decreasing our match requirements, and then improvements to transparency and collaboration. So that's to say the letter is pretty high level. And if we decide to draft one, then I think we'd probably take a similar approach, because there's a lot that would be in a federal reauthorization bill. And we probably can't touch on everything that would be in there. Just to shift a little bit and talk about the Build Act for a couple slides. So this is the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's proposed reauthorization bill. The Senate hasn't yet released a bill, and the Build America Act, what it does include, so I guess it includes aspects of what was outlined in the Basics Act. So an increase to the PL funds, which is great for MPO planning purposes. Also a reduction in local match from that 20% requirement that I mentioned earlier down to 10%. And again, because we're on a sliding scale here in Oregon, we'd likely pay less than 10 or have to pay less than 10% match. So that further reduces the burden on our local partners for contributing to that, at least the PL part of our match requirements. Adds new direct recipient option, FEMA's option. So a lot of the same themes that are in the Basics Act. In the center here, just at a high level, it's about $581 billion over 5 years. The majority of that from the Highway Trust Fund, and then about $107 billion that would be coming from general funds. And last to mention on this slide is just the biggest change is that shift back towards formula funding, rather to where we have been with the IIJA, which is a lot more competitive grant programs, where local jurisdictions had to apply to be considered for funding sources. I will just mention, the Bridge Formula Program at $9 billion per year. Safe Streets and Road for All is continued under the Build Act. And then a new Surface Transportation Accelerator Grant Program, which is the proposal is to be a flexible grant program that has broad eligibility. And I think the purpose of this program is consolidation of other programs. And so this would be one of the ways to access competitive grant funding. So it's a long legislative timeline. I think the only thing I'll mention on this slide is it's the Build Act's currently being discussed in the House. And what we've heard from the AMPO partners is that we're likely to have a extension of the current authorization, just based on the current calendar and all the work that it would take to pass a bill. So it's likely we'll see the IIJA extended for some period of time going forward past September 30th. But the Build Act, it underscores kind of the general direction that Congress is going when they eventually pass a surface transportation bill. So I think this is my last slide, and on the right side, it's just some bullet points about what our next steps can be. So educating the delegation, our congressional delegation, on things that we like about the bill, flagging any concerning elements, so that this could be through a letter that just discusses at a high level what SKATS feel is important to include in a reauthorization, following along the process, because it's going to be a fairly long process, but eventually, hopefully, it'll result in a new surface transportation bill. And then on the left, just noting that there are items that are very much on the watch list, and things like the current proposal includes the elimination of the carbon reduction program. So that's something that IMPO and GeoPorts are working on. There's some other changes to the CMAQ program that are on the watch list. And so anyway, point being that it's progress towards a next reauthorization, but there's still work to be done. And there's opportunity for comment on what's included in there. And I think that's what's going to be taking place over the next several months as the reauthorization process continues. So that's all I have for slides, but I think we can have discussion, but I don't know if we can wait on the consideration of a letter until the next meeting, when we have a few more folks in the room.
I think that sounds wise. Thank you for the presentation, though. That was helpful. I need to go look at our emails from CFM that represents transit at the federal level and see how they're reporting in on this. Sounds
Yeah,
like
I think that would be helpful information. I'd be interested in what what the transit agency or the member agencies for transits are, what their opinions on it are. I think if we decide to as a group, we can have a letter that would hopefully be supportive of everyone's goals in the room, and just include our wishes, I guess, is the best way to put it for the next bill.
Do you want to mention the OMPOC letter?
I did mention it, yeah. So the OMPOC letters included, I guess I could share it too, in the H. I'll pull that up really quickly. But this will give an idea of what the letters that have been submitted look like. And so it's some preamble about the Basics Act and support from MPOs of the 8 MPOs in Oregon for the Basics Act. A little bit about who makes up the OMPOC board. And then, like I mentioned, there's basically 5 bullet points, very high level about what about the Basics Act that OMPOC supports. So delivering regional priorities faster by increasing funding for the STBG program, which I mentioned has a lot of flexibility for programs and how that funding is used. The focus on safety and increases to the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the investment in the bridge program, regional programming being strengthened through the reduction in required match and increase in funds for PL funds for metropolitan planning. And then the transparency bullet point is discussing, what is it? Collaboration across the federal, state, and regional and local partners to ensure local voices are heard and reflect what communities need most. And then it just wraps up with who is represented, who put forward the Basics Act itself. So hopefully, if that's the direction the policy committee would want to go, we could put something together that would probably look very similar to this and suit the needs of the committee.
Or we could just keep it the way it is and support for the basic. Use the OMPOC letter as what we, contributed to. So
right.
Not necessary for us to send a letter since the OMPOC is representing us as well. But I think this is as much as to let you know about these 2 different bills and what's inside of them, and that our Oregon MPOs are generally in favor with the principles that they have inside as far as increasing some of the funds to local MPO areas, some of the changes into the match requirements. So not really necessary for us to send a letter, but it's whatever the next legislation is, obviously can affect MPOs. So.
All right. Yeah, I think maybe we could discuss submitting a letter at I think the July meeting is probably most timely. It seems like August is pushing up against their deadlines pretty closely. So if we're planning to get something out there as a group, I'd like to do it prior to that.
Although, as Steve said, legislation goes very slow in Congress.
Yes.
So even though the current act expires in September, right? September. Probably, if I was guessing, it's probably more likely to do an extension than they'd have a whole new bill. But you never know; they might surprise us.
Well, I for one like to be on time, so just because they're running behind doesn't mean we can't be on time.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from policy committee members hanging on? Okay. I think we can move on to item G on our agenda, which is a summary of modifications to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program.
Sure. So there's an attachment to agenda item G, and there's two amendments in there that took place in the last month. And the first one was approved by the policy committee at last month's meeting. That was adding a new project for ADA pedestrian signals, MoDOT project. And then the second one was an administrative amendment related to our 2027 SKATS planning funds, and it was just an update, a minor update of about $7,000 to our 5303 formula funds. And those adjustments are normal this type of year when I think it's after the appropriations. And so they get a final number for the 5303 planning dollars. And so that's been approved as well.
Thank you for sharing those updates. I believe that brings us to our final agenda item, which is agenda item H, informational items.
All right, I'll take this one. So first we have a few dates for the next committee meetings in July. The July 28th is your policy committee meeting, and the TAC meeting will be the 14th. As a reminder of what we said before about in-kind match, we're going to start counting attendance at meetings as part of those in-kind dollars we want to use as part of the match. So both for your staff level and for you, well, your policy committee members as well. So, okay, as Steve said, the OMPOC group met. The next meeting is in August or early September. There's a poll out right now. Then we have some dates for the OTC members. In the table for planning updates, we postponed the MPO structure discussion until the July meeting. We are kind of waiting to see what Salem has a position that they'd like to share. My banks told me that Salem was not quite ready to make a decision by whatever process they want to use. So that's why it wasn't on this month's agenda item. So hopefully it's going to be in July. Then there's an update about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Ray is working on the different chapters. We have a draft of the needs and gap analysis that's being reviewed. And there's a link to that if you want to take a look. The OMPOC meeting on June 5th, Commissioner Boardhorse could not attend. And when I asked last month if there was anyone who could attend in his place, we didn't have anyone that stepped up. So it was just staff attending the meeting. We have a summary in the table of some of the items that were completed. We have a new chair. It's Portland Metro Councilor Christine Lewis. As we noted, there was an update on the OMPOC legislative priorities, and that is in the packet. So OMPOC has put together, I think this was the previous 2025 priorities, and they want to discuss those priorities at the next meeting they scheduled, if they want to make adjustments to that language. And that's attached in your agenda packet, the 2025 priorities. Then there's a presentation about the statewide transportation improvement fund. That's a transit fund. We got a presentation on the Basic Act and the Build Act, the one you just heard. And then finally, we got a presentation about Governor Kotek's Rebuilding Our Transportation Vision work group. That work group began meeting in May. They have expert groups working underneath that group. And the goal is to come up with funding challenges. We'll review funding challenges, transportation needs, priorities, trade-offs. They want to provide recommendations to the governor to inform action for the next legislative session. So there's a link in there for the work group's website if you're curious to look at the agenda topics and listen to their discussion. I did note that former City of Detroit Mayor Jim Trett is on the work group, the governor's work group. And like I said, there's work groups and then there's a bunch of expert groups underneath them. Finally, for Safe Routes to School, the COG signed an agreement to receive $7,000 from Marion County Extension. We'll use that to buy our second trailer for the program. Attached in the packet is some information about our program. I should say the infographic. So my staff worked on this where I'll be open. Nice little infographic showing for the academic year how many schools participated in the bicycle safety program. 8 schools, over 1,800 students. 51% were first-time riders. We had volunteers assisting staff and all this, contributing 455 hours. We did buy a new bike fleet trailer. We'll buy a second one this summer. And with that trailer, we bought 35 bikes and 300 helmets. So we'll double that for the second trailer. And this is just one part of the Safe Routes to School program. We do walk to school programs, we do transit safety programs, but they did a very nice job on the bicycle safety. And I could talk about Safe Routes to School for a while, but I won't. It's time unless you have questions. That program is going very well. Lastly, on June 11th, our Safe Routes to School program partnered with others from Eugene and Portland and did a group ride from Riverfront Park to the Oregon Capitol to celebrate the 55th anniversary of the signing of the bicycle bill. And there's an attachment in the packet about that. They've been very, very busy. The next thing they're doing is a Keizer Blast Camp, which is like a safety town for an event going in Keizer. Well, they'll be doing it for I think 2 or 3 days. With non-safety activities dealing with pedestrian and bicycle. And unless there's any questions, I'll conclude there.
Great, thank you, Mike. Any questions? All right, well, I believe that takes us to the end of our agenda items. So I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It is 1:43 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for sharing, Sadie.
Sorry to be remote.